constantly eating.
And well, I'll speak to that. I mean, it's the last day of his life, and you know that from the start. And so my hope was that everything he does will be intensified in heaven. So here's his last meal. You're watching filming his last meal, and then even based that on I'll talk to you before. I'll put I guess like but it's like every little thing takes on a different kind of significance because you know it's the last day. And so things, and then there are certain things that maybe I get to airplane noises or things like that to both heighten it. So all the guidance is fairly quiet, you have this song when you get fly, and it's just to give a little bit of a sense that here comes fate, here comes whatever, that this is, not just any day, even though maybe Sal thinks it is, this is the day. And this is the day that we're saying characterizes his whole life and is the last day of his life. So there are certain things like airplanes that are both characteristic of LA, but also give a sense that there's, I don't know, something above, something more, channeling, the last day of his life. And because, and I guess in a lot of ways, it was just a weird, strange, random occurrence. This was a guy not waiting to kill Sal Mineo. He was probably just there to rob somebody, and Sal was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and that's how it happened. So whether it's whatever that is, just by virtue of the fact that we decided to focus on his last day, we're saying, well, there's something here.
So that's why I talked about it. He planned, he tried to work out everything, but and nothing seemed to work out for him. And there's just so many things in that book that kind of come to mind. Like, he loved to play Ouija, and at one point he spelled out, just to try to fool some of his friends, Sal will be murdered. I mean, there's so many things that seem to lead to this in the book, and I guess you must have come across this on that, didn't you, Val?
Yeah, he did do that. He had an idea that there was an afterlife, and he would always try to channel James Dean and various friends, and then also pull pranks on his friends, and I don't know, always played with the idea of death and the afterlife, and that was all over the book. Yeah.
There's a weird kind of poetic sense to this too, It's almost like Wallace Stegner or something, this kind of weird dissociative power it has. Is that because it's almost like he's sort of dreaming it in some weird way? Is that what you were trying to do in terms of intensifying all these kind of auditory and all these sensual things, really, hearing things and eating things, and the way he plays with the dog? It's like he's almost trying to take in the world before he goes.
Yeah, I mean, when Michael wrote the book, he's writing it in hindsight too. He knows that Sal is murdered, and there are certain things that just happen, and by setting up the film in this way, knowing that this is his last day, things are going to resonate in a different way. So, with the great John Lennon or Cobain, they kill themselves or they're murdered, and then all of a sudden you go back and listen to the song lyrics. Where did he predict it? Did he plan this? Did he know beforehand? I mean, that's just kind of what happens, and I knew that if we had structured it this way, and we worked it in the right way, that it would work to our advantage, that it would hopefully heighten the audience's perception of what was going on, pay closer attention to all these things, even though, for the most part, it's just an actor going through his day. Well, yes, but it's also, to me, it shows like all of our days. What do? We're striving for what? To express ourselves to each other, or for whatever. But he kind of just goes through everything that a person does in a life. He's working out to better himself. He's rehearsing. He's trying to be the best artist he was his whole life. He's living. He's loving. I mean, with the dog, it's like here's a way to express affection without having to do like a full-on like love scene or like
an avowal to Courtney or whatever. This is a way to show all that without being too manipulative or manufacturing something that didn't happen.
But still, and you can talk this a little bit too, Val, you can't help but sort of, as you're making a movie of this, it becomes mythic by virtue of the fact you're making it about the last day of Sal Minio's life. I mean, I know what you're talking about and not wanting to emphasize that too much, but doesn't that become part of it anyway? You're sort of building onto the myth with it?
Yeah, I guess so. Just, again, by the very fact that it's the last day of his life, everything becomes kind of poignant, became kind of poignant, you know, even more poignant for me. Yeah. I wouldn't even know how to answer it, because everything that we see in the movie actually happened. I mean, the dog was actually his neighbor Nancy's dog, who he had a affection for, and he had affection for animals. And it's what's mythic is everything you see is true, and that's what's most shocking to me, even sitting here and talking about it. It's not fictional, you know.
What's fascinating too is that you guys spent so much time on a guy who spent a lot, the way some people do if you don't have family, he spent a lot of that last day alone. So it's a really interesting problem to give yourself to dramatize something like this, where you can't have him say it, but you want to somehow build a kind of tension, right?
I mean, all unabashedly say, you know, Gus Van Sant is like one of my, the people I look up to the most as a director, and you know, so he, in a way, kind of solved this the problem of like a traditional biopic or melodrama with Last Days. I know, you know, that's not everyone's cup of tea, but it's like, well,
But that's a really sort of self-consciously mythic movie, though. He says that about Last Days.
mythic in what sense?
It said that he sort of basically coalesced a life until the last few days of somebody.
Right, well, who knows what happened those last 4 days? He spent a lot of time alone. So, yeah, I mean, that's also a lesson I learned on Milk, where I remember thinking, while we were in San Francisco, we were shooting in all the locations that all these things took place. We shot in the camera shop where, you know, Harvey Milk and the guy I played, Scott Smith, you know, worked, and it was all the actual locations. A lot of the people in the community that had been there at that time, you know, came out and helped out and were in the movie, and it felt like such a huge thing and such an important story. I was thinking to myself, gosh, how can Gus function? How can he even make this? I mean, the weight would feel like too much for me. How do you even make artistic decisions without fearing that you're gonna like get it wrong? And but I guess that I kind of knew the answer in a way where I played James Dean, and everybody has, you know, different stories about who he was, especially someone like James Dean who's so mercurial. After a while, you get all the information you can, and then after a while, you have to first say, all right, this is going to be my version, and it's just how it has to be. You can't do everybody's version. And two, in the private moments, who knows what Harvey Milk said to Scott Smith when they were back at their apartment? Who knows what that was like? Even if, you know, Harvey and Scott were around today to say, well, this is how I was doing this. I mean, how clear are each of us about how we're behaving or what we're like? And so, at those moments you say, all right, I think I know what this is, and I'm going to just trust my instincts and say, this is how he maybe behaved on his own, and then you run with it, and you get a great actor who also is going to find a way into this person, and then let him just be him, and I think in that way you do get closer to those private moments that nobody is ever going to recall. The only way you're going to recall them is this way.
One of the things